I flew in to surprise my husband after his promotion, but he was already with someone else. I am Linda Ray Montgomery, 56 years old, and after 27 years of marriage, I thought I knew my husband better than anyone in the world. I was carrying his favorite cherry pie and a bottle of champagne when I used my key to open the door of his Austin condo, ready to surprise him for his big promotion. Instead, I found him in our bed with a woman young enough to be our daughter. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more about standing up for yourself when marriage vows are broken. To understand how a middle school English teacher from Boise, Idaho ended up orchestrating the downfall of a regional sales director and his mistress, you need to know about the life I thought I was living versus the lie I was actually trapped in. Doug and I met in college when we were both 22. He was studying business. I was getting my teaching degree, and we fell into an easy rhythm that felt like coming home. He was charming and ambitious, always talking about the future we'd build together. I was the steady one, the planner, the one who made sure bills got paid and birthdays got remembered while he chased his dreams. We married right after graduation in a small ceremony in my hometown. My parents loved Doug. He had that salesman's gift for making everyone feel like the most important person in the room. What I didn't realize then was that I was already becoming invisible to him, even on our wedding day. He spent our reception working the room, networking with my father's business contacts, while I sat at the head table watching him charm everyone except me. The first 10 years were the building years. Doug climbed the ladder at Regional Hardware Supply while I taught 6th grade English and kept our household running. When our first son Michael was born, I took a year off, then went back part-time. When our second son James arrived 3 years later, I switched to substitute teaching to have more flexibility. Every career decision I made revolved around supporting Doug's advancement and raising our boys. Doug was good at his job. He had an instinct for reading people and telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. He won Salesman of the Year 3 times and gradually moved into management. With each promotion came longer hours, more travel, and more stories about difficult clients that required his personal attention. I never questioned it. I was proud of his success, grateful for the financial security, and busy enough with the boys that I didn't notice how rarely we talked about anything that wasn't logistics. The middle years brought challenges that should have brought us closer but somehow pushed us further apart. My mother's long battle with cancer meant frequent trips back home and mounting medical bills that we quietly absorbed. Doug's father had a stroke that left him partially paralyzed, requiring us to help with his care. Through all of it, I was the one who managed the emotional labor, the hospital visits, the insurance calls, the difficult conversations with doctors. Doug showed up when he had to, but he always seemed to have an urgent work crisis that pulled him away from the hardest moments. When the boys hit their teenage years, our house became chaos central. Between soccer tournaments, debate team competitions, college prep, and typical adolescent drama, my days were consumed with managing their lives. Doug provided financially but was increasingly absent emotionally. He'd come home from work, eat dinner while checking emails, and retreat to his home office for strategic planning calls that often lasted until I was already asleep. I told myself this was normal. All my friends complained about their husbands being emotionally distant. All the parenting magazines talked about marriages going through rough patches during the child-rearing years. I convinced myself that once the kids were launched, Doug and I would rediscover each other. We'd travel, take up hobbies together, maybe even renew our vows for our 30th anniversary. The empty nest years arrived with James heading off to college and Michael settling in Seattle with his girlfriend. Suddenly, it was just Doug and me in our 4-bedroom house, and the silence was deafening. I had imagined cozy dinners where we'd finally have uninterrupted conversations, weekend trips to explore places we'd never had time to visit, evenings reading together on the couch like we used to in our early years. Instead, Doug seemed to find more reasons to work late. Regional Hardware Supply was expanding, and he was being considered for a major promotion to Regional Sales Director for the Southwest Territory. It would mean relocating to Austin and overseeing sales teams across 5 states. He talked about it constantly, the prestige, the salary increase, the corner office, the company car. When I asked where I fit into these plans, he'd wave vaguely and say we'd figure it out together. The promotion was announced on a Tuesday in March. Doug called me from the office, his voice buzzing with excitement. "Linda, I got it. Regional Sales Director, Southwest Territory. They want me in Austin by the 1st of May to start setting up the new regional headquarters. I was genuinely thrilled for him. After 25 years with the company, he'd finally achieved his dream position. That's wonderful, honey. I'm so proud of you. When do we start looking at houses in Austin? There was a pause that should have warned me. Well, the company's providing a corporate condo for the first 6 months while I get established. They want me to focus entirely on the transition without worrying about real estate. You could finish out the school year in Boise, and we'll figure out the permanent move over the summer. It made sense logically, but something in his tone felt off. When I suggested flying down to see the condo and help him get settled, he quickly discouraged it. The first few months are going to be insane. 12-hour days, weekend strategy sessions, constant travel to the branch offices. You'd just be sitting alone in a strange city while I work. Better to wait until things calm down. For 2 months, our conversations became brief check-ins about logistics. Doug would call while driving between meetings, always rushed, always distracted. When I asked about his days, he'd give generic responses about spreadsheets and conference calls. When I shared news from home, our neighbor's new grandchild, the drama at school, progress on refinishing the guest room, he'd make appropriate noises, but I could tell he wasn't really listening. The distance felt different this time. It wasn't just physical separation, it was emotional disconnection that made me feel like I was talking to a polite stranger who happened to share my last name. But I told myself it was temporary stress from the new position. Once he got established, things would return to normal. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Friday afternoon in late June, and I was grading summer school essays when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Doug's number, but the voice belonged to someone else, a woman with a crisp, professional tone. Mrs. Montgomery? This is Marissa Jennings from Human Resources at Regional Hardware Supply. I'm calling because your husband asked me to let you know he'll be in meetings all weekend and won't be able to call until Monday. I stared at my red pen, confusion washing over me. I'm sorry, but why wouldn't Doug call me himself? Oh, he's in back-to-back strategy sessions with the executive team. Very intense weekend. He didn't want you to worry when you couldn't reach him. Something cold settled in my stomach. In 27 years of marriage, Doug had never had someone else call to cancel our weekend check-ins. And why would an HR executive be making personal calls for a regional sales director? Thank you for calling, I managed. Could you give Doug a message? Tell him Linda called and that I hope his meetings go well. Of course, Mrs. Montgomery. I'm sure he'll appreciate hearing from you. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone. The call felt wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. There was something too familiar in how she said Doug's name, too casual in how she discussed his schedule, and the timing, 4 p.m. on a Friday when most corporate offices were winding down for the weekend. I tried calling Doug's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. By Sunday evening, I was oscillating between worry and anger. When he finally called Monday morning, his explanation was breezy and apologetic. Sorry, babe. Last-minute crisis with the Dallas territory. Had to lock ourselves in a conference room all weekend to salvage a major account. You know how these things go. I wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root. The woman from HR who called Marissa something. She seemed very involved in your schedule. Marissa Jennings, yeah? She's helping coordinate the transition. Super organized, thank God. I'd be drowning without her keeping track of everything. The casual way he said her name, like they'd discussed her many times before, though he'd never mentioned her to me, sent another chill through me. Over the next few weeks, I found myself paying closer attention to our conversations. Doug mentioned Marissa frequently, always in professional contexts, but with a warmth that never entered his voice when he talked about other colleagues. Marissa had arranged his travel schedule. Marissa had researched restaurants for client dinners. Marissa had suggested a more efficient filing system for regional reports. I started Googling her name combined with Regional Hardware Supply. Her LinkedIn profile showed an attractive redhead in her early 30s with an MBA from UT Austin and 5 years of HR experience. Her profile photo showed her at some kind of company event, standing close to a group of executives. I studied the picture for signs of Doug but couldn't spot him. The paranoia felt foreign and ugly. I'd never been a suspicious wife, never checked Doug's phone or questioned his whereabouts. But something fundamental had shifted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that important conversations were happening around me rather than with me. In mid-July, Doug called with news that should have excited me. Great news, Lynn. The transition's going so well that corporate wants me to host the Southwest Regional Conference here in Austin in August. All the district managers will be flying in for a 3-day strategy summit. It's a huge opportunity to make my mark with the executive team. That sounds wonderful. What dates? I could fly down and... Actually, it's going to be pretty intensive. 15-hour days, formal presentations, evening networking events. Probably better if you wait until after the conference when I can actually spend time with you. Once again, I was being managed rather than included. Doug, I've been to plenty of your work events over the years. I know how to entertain clients and make small talk with executives. This feels like something we should be doing together. I know, and normally you'd be right. But this particular event is make or break for establishing my credibility with the regional VPs. I can't afford any distractions. Distractions. After 27 years of supporting his career, I had become a distraction. That night, I called my sister Carol in Portland. We'd always been close, and she had an uncanny ability to cut through my tendency to overthink everything. Carol, I think something's wrong with Doug. Wrong how? Is he sick? No, not sick. Different. Distant. Like he's living a completely separate life in Austin and I'm not part of it. There was a pause before Carol spoke carefully. Lynn, can I ask you something? When's the last time Doug made you feel like he was excited to talk to you? The question hit like a physical blow because I couldn't remember. Our recent conversations felt perfunctory, like items being checked off a to-do list. When had he stopped asking about my day with genuine interest? When had he stopped sharing the small moments that make up a life? I think I need to surprise him, I said finally. Fly down to Austin unannounced and see what's really going on. Are you sure you want to do that? If there's nothing wrong, it could seem like you don't trust him. But I don't trust him anymore, that's the problem. I spent the next week planning. Doug had mentioned that the regional conference was August 15-17, and he'd be staying at the corporate condo to be close to the venue. I booked a flight for August 13th, 2 days before the conference started. It would give us a quiet evening together before the work chaos began. I told Doug I was visiting Carol for a few days. He barely reacted to the news, just mumbled something about having a good time. I made his favorite cherry pie, the same recipe his mother had taught me during our first year of marriage. I bought a bottle of champagne, the expensive kind we usually saved for anniversaries. I even bought a new dress, something younger and more fitted than my usual teacher wardrobe. The flight to Austin felt surreal. I kept imagining Doug's face when I walked through the door, how surprised and happy he'd be. We'd have a romantic dinner, maybe walk around downtown Austin, reconnect in a way that had been impossible over the phone. I'd apologize for being suspicious, and he'd apologize for being distant, and we'd remember why we'd fallen in love in the first place. The corporate condo was in a sleek downtown complex, all glass and steel with a doorman and underground parking. Doug had given me the address, but not the specific apartment number, so I had to charm the front desk clerk into giving me Doug's floor and unit number by explaining I was his wife with a surprise. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt endless. I clutched the pie carrier and champagne bottle, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nerves. I'd practiced what I'd say when he opened the door, something playful about his favorite teacher bringing homework and refreshments. I found Unit 1507 and quietly inserted the spare key Doug had mailed me months ago in case of emergencies. I wanted the element of surprise, wanted to see his genuine, unguarded reaction to my arrival. The condo was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin, modern furniture, a kitchen with granite countertops. It looked like a magazine spread, impersonal and pristine. I set the pie and champagne on the kitchen island and looked around for signs of Doug's presence. That's when I heard the laughter. It was coming from the bedroom down the hall, Doug's voice mixed with a woman's higher, musical laugh. My blood turned to ice as I stood frozen in the entryway, my mind scrambling for innocent explanations. Maybe he was on a conference call. Maybe he was video chatting with colleagues about the upcoming conference. But then I heard her voice clearly. "You are terrible. What if she calls while we're in bed?" And Doug's response, "She won't. She thinks I'm in meetings all week. Besides, she's visiting her sister. We have until Sunday." The world tilted sideways. The champagne bottle slipped from my hand and shattered on the hardwood floor, the sound echoing through the condo like a gunshot. The laughter stopped abruptly. I heard movement, urgent whispers, then Doug's voice calling out uncertainly, "Hello, is someone there?" I stood among the champagne and broken glass, 27 years of marriage dissolving around my feet. Part of me wanted to run, to preserve the illusion a little longer, to avoid the confrontation that would change everything. But the teacher in me, the part that had spent decades dealing with difficult situations and uncomfortable truths, kept me rooted in place. "It's me, Doug," I called back, my voice somehow steady. "Your wife. I came to surprise you." The silence that followed was deafening. Then footsteps, hurried movement, whispered conversations I couldn't quite make out. I used the time to pull out my phone and start recording, some instinct telling me I'd need evidence of whatever was about to unfold. Doug appeared first, wearing only boxers and a hastily thrown-on t-shirt, his hair disheveled and his face pale with shock. Behind him, trying to stay hidden in the hallway, I caught a glimpse of red hair and bare shoulders. "Linda," he said my name like it was a foreign word he was trying to pronounce. "What are you doing here?" "I came to surprise my husband for his big promotion," I replied, my voice gaining strength, "to celebrate his success with his favorite pie and champagne. Silly me. I thought you'd be alone." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. For the first time in our marriage, the man who could sell anything to anyone was completely speechless. "Are you going to introduce me to your friend?" I continued, my tone conversational. "Or should I introduce myself?" The woman emerged from the hallway, wearing one of Doug's button-down shirts and nothing else. She was exactly what I'd expected from her LinkedIn photo, young, beautiful, confident in the way that only comes with never having experienced real failure or loss. "Mrs. Montgomery," she said, extending her hand as if we were meeting at a cocktail party. "I'm Marissa Jennings. I work with Doug at Regional Hardware Supply." The audacity was breathtaking. I looked at her outstretched hand, then back at her face, noting the complete absence of shame or embarrassment. "Yes, I remember you," I said calmly. "You're the one who called to cancel my weekend phone calls with my husband. How thoughtful of you to keep his schedule so organized." Doug finally found his voice. "Linda, this isn't what it looks like." I laughed, actually laughed out loud. "Really, Doug? Because it looks like you're having an affair with a woman young enough to be our daughter in the condo your company provided while you've been lying to me for months about working late. What exactly should it look like?" "We need to talk," he said, taking a step toward me. "Oh, we definitely need to talk. But first, I have some questions for Marissa." I turned to the younger woman, who was watching our exchange with the detached interest of someone observing a mildly entertaining drama. "How long has this been going on?" Marissa glanced at Doug, who shook his head almost imperceptibly, but she was clearly tired of hiding. "Since May," she said with a shrug. "When Doug started working here." 3 months. 3 months of lies, of manufactured distance, of feeling crazy for suspecting what was right in front of me. "And this was always the plan?" I continued. "Get the promotion, move to Austin, start a new life with your much younger colleague?" "It's not like that," Doug said desperately. "This just happened. We didn't plan anything." "Right," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You just accidentally fell into bed together repeatedly while accidentally lying to your wife about your schedule and accidentally having your girlfriend call to manage our communications." Marissa stepped forward, and I saw a flash of something harder in her expression. "Look, Mrs. Montgomery, I understand this is difficult for you. But Doug and I are adults, and we have a connection that—" "Stop." The word came out sharper than I'd intended. "Stop right there. You don't get to explain my husband's feelings to me. You don't get to stand there in his shirt and tell me about your connection. You're a homewrecker, plain and simple, and Doug is a liar and a cheat. Let's not dress it up with romantic language." For the first time, Marissa looked uncomfortable. Doug moved between us like he was protecting her from me, and that small gesture hurt more than all the lies combined. "Linda, please. Let's just talk about this calmly." Calmly? I felt something crack open inside me, 27 years of suppressed resentments pouring out. "You want me to be calm while you discuss how to manage the inconvenient wife who just interrupted your love nest? I've been calm for 27 years, Doug." I've been calm through your mother's demands and your father's stroke and your endless work emergencies that somehow always took priority over our family. I've been calm through empty nest syndrome and feeling invisible in my own marriage and watching you become a stranger who happens to live in my house. I'm done being calm. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Doug in his boxers, Marissa in his shirt, the rumpled bed visible through the bedroom doorway. The overall scene of domestic betrayal. "What are you doing?" Doug lunged for my phone, but I stepped back. "Documenting. For the divorce attorney I'll be calling tomorrow." "Divorce?" Doug's face went white. "Linda, let's not make any hasty decisions. We can work through this." "Work through this?" I laughed again, but there was no humor in it. Work through you lying to me for months? Work through you starting a whole new relationship while pretending to be my husband? Work through you bringing your mistress into a bed that I helped pay for? There's nothing to work through, Doug. You already made your decision. Marissa was getting dressed quickly, clearly uncomfortable with how the situation was escalating. "Maybe I should go," she said to Doug. "Maybe you should," I agreed. "But before you do, I have one more question. Does Regional Hardware Supply know about your relationship? Because I'm pretty sure there are policies about supervisors sleeping with their direct reports." The look that passed between them told me everything I needed to know. They'd been violating company policy along with marriage vows. "Actually, don't answer that," I continued. "I'll ask HR myself." "Oh, wait, you are HR. How convenient." Doug was scrambling for damage control. "Linda, please don't do anything that could hurt my career. I know you're angry, but..." "Now you're worried about consequences?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You should have thought about your career before you decided to sleep with a subordinate. You should have thought about consequences before you lied to me for months. You should have thought about a lot of things, Doug, but it's too late now." I turned and walked toward the door, stepping carefully around the broken champagne glass. The pie still sat on the kitchen island, a symbol of everything I'd been foolish enough to believe about our marriage. "Where are you going?" Doug called after me. "To get a hotel room, to call a lawyer, to start planning the rest of my life without you in it." "Linda, wait. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out. This doesn't have to end our marriage." I turned back to look at him one last time, this man I'd built my entire adult life around, who'd just revealed himself to be a stranger willing to throw away everything we'd built for a woman who could have been our daughter. Our marriage ended months ago, Doug. I just didn't know it yet. I walked out of the condo and didn't look back. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, research, and strategic planning. I checked into a hotel near the airport and immediately called Carol, who booked the next flight to Austin to be with me. I called a divorce attorney, whose name I found through an online search for high-asset divorce specialists in Idaho. I called our accountant to get copies of all our financial records. I called our sons to tell them their father and I were separating conversations that broke my heart but needed to happen before they heard it from someone else. Most importantly, I called Regional Hardware Supply's corporate headquarters. I'd done my homework during the sleepless hours after leaving Doug's condo. Regional Hardware Supply was a publicly traded company with strict policies about workplace relationships, especially between supervisors and subordinates. As regional sales director, Doug was technically Marissa's superior, even though she worked in HR. Their relationship wasn't just an affair, it was a violation of company policy that could result in termination. I spoke to the head of corporate HR, a woman named Patricia Williams, who took my call very seriously once I explained the situation. "Mrs. Montgomery, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Workplace relationships that violate our hierarchy policies are taken very seriously here, especially when they involve regional leadership positions." "I have documentation," I told her. "Photos, evidence of the relationship, proof that they've been lying about their interactions. We'll need to conduct a full investigation. Would you be willing to provide a formal statement?" "Absolutely. I want them both held accountable." Within a week, the investigation was complete. Doug was terminated for violating workplace relationship policies and falsifying time reports to hide personal activities during work hours. Marissa was demoted and transferred to a different region. The company also discovered that Doug had been charging personal expenses to his company credit card, including dinners and hotel rooms for his affair, which resulted in additional charges of financial misconduct. But my revenge was just getting started. I hired the best divorce attorney in Boise, a woman named Rebecca Stone who specialized in high-asset divorces involving infidelity. Idaho is not a no-fault divorce state, which meant Doug's affair could impact how assets were divided. Rebecca was particularly interested in the financial misconduct at his job and the fact that he'd been using marital assets to support his affair. "We're going to go after everything," Rebecca told me during our first meeting. The house, his pension, his stock options, alimony, everything. Adultery changes the game significantly in your favor. I discovered that I was much better at strategic warfare than I'd ever imagined. 27 years of managing a household, supporting a career, and raising children had given me organizational skills that translated perfectly to dismantling a life methodically and thoroughly. I changed all the passwords on our joint accounts. I documented every expense Doug had charged to our credit cards that could be related to his affair. I gathered evidence of all his lies about working late, cross-referencing his claimed work schedule with his actual company calendar that I accessed through his laptop. I contacted all our friends and family to tell my side of the story before Doug could spin the narrative. Most satisfyingly, I reached out to the wives of Doug's colleagues at Regional Hardware Supply. I'd met most of them at company Christmas parties and retirement dinners over the years. They deserved to know what kind of man their husbands were working with and what had really happened at those intensive weekend strategy sessions. The response was immediate and devastating for Doug's reputation. Regional Hardware Supply operated on relationships and trust, and word spread quickly through the company network that Doug Montgomery was the guy who'd thrown away a 27-year marriage for a younger woman and got fired for it. His professional network, built over decades, crumbled almost overnight. But the most beautiful revenge was what happened to Doug and Marissa themselves. Without the excitement of sneaking around and the validation of the successful older man, their relationship imploded within months. Marissa discovered that Doug, newly unemployed and going through an expensive divorce, was not nearly as charming or generous as he'd seemed when he was spending company money and lying about his availability. Doug discovered that Marissa, facing a career setback and social ostracism at work, was not nearly as supportive or understanding as he'd hoped. I heard through mutual friends that they'd broken up acrimoniously, with Marissa claiming Doug had misrepresented his financial situation and Doug claiming Marissa had only been interested in his position and status. The irony was delicious. They'd destroyed 3 lives for a connection that couldn't survive the reality of consequences. The divorce proceedings took 18 months, during which I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I took early retirement from teaching and used my settlement money to travel, all the places Doug and I had talked about visiting but never quite found time for. I went to Italy with Carol, took a photography workshop in Ireland, spent a month in New Zealand hiking and exploring. I also went back to school, getting a master's degree in library science that I'd always wanted but put off for family obligations. At 58, I was finally pursuing my own dreams instead of supporting someone else's. The house sold quickly, and I bought a smaller place near downtown Boise with a garden and a reading nook. I joined a book club, started volunteering at the local literacy center, and began dating when I felt ready. It turns out that men my age who'd also been through divorces appreciated qualities like honesty, reliability, and emotional availability, qualities Doug had taken for granted for decades. My sons initially struggled with their father's betrayal and the divorce, but they came to understand that I'd made the right choice. Michael, now married with a baby on the way, told me he was proud of how I'd handled everything. James, finishing law school, said watching me navigate the divorce had taught him important lessons about self-respect and not settling for less than you deserve. 2 years after that terrible night in Austin, I ran into Doug at the grocery store. He looked older, tired, and he was alone. He approached me cautiously, like he wasn't sure if I'd speak to him. "Linda, how are you?" "I'm well, Doug, really well. I heard you went back to school, and that you're traveling." "I am. Ireland last month, planning a trip to Japan in the spring." He looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his shopping cart handle. I wanted to apologize, for everything, for how it ended, for the hurt I caused. I studied his face, looking for the man I'd once loved, but mostly seeing a stranger who'd made choices I couldn't understand or forgive. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "But the apology needed to happen 2 years ago, before you destroyed our marriage for someone who didn't even love you." He flinched. I know I made mistakes, huge mistakes. I lost everything that mattered. No, Doug, you threw away everything that mattered. There's a difference. Losing something implies it was beyond your control. You made deliberate choices that you knew would hurt me, and when you got caught, your first instinct was to protect your mistress and your career, not to fight for our marriage. Is there any chance we could try again, start over? The question caught me off guard, but the answer came easily. No, there isn't. What we had was built on me sacrificing my dreams for yours, me being invisible so you could shine, me holding everything together while you chased validation elsewhere. I'm not that person anymore, and honestly, I'm grateful for that. I left him standing there in the produce section and walked away feeling lighter than I had in years. The final piece of my revenge happened recently, when I learned through Facebook that Marissa had been fired from her new position for similar policy violations with another supervisor. Apparently, she'd developed a pattern of using relationships with higher-ups to advance her career, and it had finally caught up with her. She was now working for a temp agency and had moved back in with her parents. Doug, meanwhile, had taken a lower-level sales job with a small regional company at half his previous salary. The professional reputation he'd spent decades building was gone, and he was starting over in his 60s with no wife, no family support system, and no respect from former colleagues. Some people might say I was too harsh, too calculated in my revenge, but I don't see it that way. I simply stopped enabling their deception and let natural consequences play out. Doug chose to lie and cheat. I chose to tell the truth. Marissa chose to violate professional ethics. I chose to report it to the appropriate authorities. They chose to destroy a marriage. I chose to protect myself and rebuild. The sweetest revenge wasn't their suffering, it was my joy. It was discovering that at 58, I could still surprise myself, still grow, still build a life that brought me genuine happiness. It was learning that being chosen by someone who actually sees and values you feels completely different from being taken for granted by someone who sees you as a convenient accessory to their ambitions. Have you ever discovered that the life you thought you were living was actually a lie? What helped you find the courage to rebuild? I hope my story reminds you that it's never too late to choose yourself, to demand the respect you deserve, and to walk away from people who treat you as disposable. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories of starting over and finding strength you never knew you had. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply living well without the people who didn't deserve you in the first place.